Welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Futures. Today we are exploring a big and timely question. Is this the end of B2B GTM as we know it? AI is now reshaping almost every part of the go-to-market of go-to-market. Content, sales outreach, localization, data analysis, customer engagement, and the way buyers discover and evaluate solutions. But while the hype is everywhere, the reality is more nuanced, and in this episode we'll look at where AI is generally replacing human effort today, where it still falls short, and how B2B teams should think about competitive advantage as execution becomes easier to automate. We'll also discuss whether the traditional B2B funnel is breaking down or simply being rebuilt, and what marketing, sales, and revenue teams should still own as we look ahead to. But before we get into the conversation, I'd love for our guests to introduce themselves. Maybe Justin, perhaps we can start with you. Could you share a bit about your role at Birdeye and where AI is showing up in your work today?
Yeah, my name is Justin Meredith. I'm a marketing manager at Birdeye, and I handle everything from our email marketing program, our sales outreach content. I host our webinars. I wear a lot of hats here, but when it comes to how we use AI, it's pretty much in every aspect of my job right now. It's pretty crazy, actually.
That's true. Thank you so much, Jason. Suvish, welcome.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm Suvish Viswanathan. I head our marketing efforts across Europe for Zoho. I've been around for a while now, so have seen the transition that we are seeing from, let's say, an on-premise to SaaS model and the marketing that goes around it. Like Justin mentioned, I think AI is today the talk of the town everywhere, even in our teams. And being a large company, there are different setups. So we will, I think, cover many of this during our discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those introductions. Let's start with the practical reality of AI in B2B GTM today. There's a lot of theory around AI replacing work, but I'd like to ground this in real examples where AI is actually replacing human effort in B2B GTM today, and where is it falling short?
Like I mentioned, I'm seeing AI used in just about every aspect of what I do. And as a company with Birdeye, we're an AI-focused platform. There's a big push internally to leverage AI in just about everything we do to be more efficient. As it relates to the specific things that we do, we're working on really going from just using ChatGPT to create content, written content, to figuring out how do we do more than just a task at a time, completing workflows. And I think that's been the big movement in 2026 is the whole agent movement. I think there was a lot of talk about agents in 2025, but I don't think a whole lot of people really understood how to do it. I think that was kind of the beginning of the movement. But in 2026, I've seen a much larger push to use AI to complete multiple steps in a row of a workflow instead of just one task at a time. I think AI has helped people become more efficient and to do a lot more things at scale. But what I've noticed is people are starting to connect these tasks to do more things at once. And I think that's where you'll see more of the replacement factor. That's kind of where I'm focused as well, is figuring out how can I really connect these things. And so instead of just writing an email, for example, how can I, right now I'm working on a platform, like I'm vibe coding something myself where I can write an email, but it's connected to my email marketing system so it can pull the content that we're sending, analyze the results against our each target segment, geography, industry that we're emailing to, and then optimize that email and then push it back into our email marketing system and send it and get the feedback. And so it's going to really be a fully closed loop system for our email marketing system versus just using ChatGPT to write, an email copy.
100%. And it's crazy that you can build the app today. You don't need to rely on a developer or someone with more experience, right? That's a great. Vish, what about you?
I'll take what Justin just mentioned, right? So it's compressing the AI is compressing the execution time. to almost near zero, right? So like he mentioned about building an app. Now, 2 years before in history, right? Just 2 years before, this would have taken days or maybe weeks, depending upon if you have an availability of developer and things like that. So when the execution timelines, it has now become almost zero. What matters is the things that AI cannot do. So I think most of the marketing teams in mid-sized, large organizations today have access to the AI platforms. They have access to platforms to build agents connected with MCPs and then connected with their CRM systems or like email system that Justin just mentioned. So we are seeing there are many of these activities today in marketing where AI can help, which are repetitive in nature, whether it is certain content production. But from there also, you can probably think of having the first draft, some variations coming from AI because it learns from your past email content, etc. You would still need human in the loop there before it is sent out, right?
Yeah.
At targeting, that's important, right? So we all in marketing, whoever is doing digital marketing, there's a lot of audience segmentation, predictive bidding, all that stuff, right? Wherever data is involved, AI can help in reducing that timeline, reducing the dependency in outbound sales, for example, prospecting. We are seeing this quite a bit. The whole account-based marketing thing, we can shrink it down to few hours because you can do the research on the company and sort of send out the campaigns more personalized and things like that. What we are seeing it is this because the timelines have shrinked, certain things that is now more important than ever. For example, with AI, especially where I am in Europe, compliance plays a big role. So the trust factor plays a big role. So as marketing teams, especially if you are working across different regions, one has to understand how we can structure the systems, keeping the guardrails in place. So even when you have new players, new team members, they understand where the boundaries are, what is the best way to put things out so that your brand is not negatively impacted.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, especially distinction between AI helping with execution and AI being able to understand the context, the nuance, the compliance, buyer behavior. Let's move to the broader GTM model, okay? Because for years, B2B teams have worked around some versions of the funnel. You mentioned Savish, like ABM, that relies on like the basic funnel, which is create awareness, capture demand, nurture the leads, then you hand them to sales, and you progress them through pipeline. But AI search, self-serve buying, automation, and changing buyer expectations are starting to challenge that model, in my opinion. Is the traditional B2B funnel breaking down, or is it simply being rebuilt? How do you think both about the funnel now?
I think if I just extend from what I initially sort of alluded to, right? So I don't think it's breaking down, but I think the certain fundamentals of the funnel remains. But what's happening in the last, let's say, couple of years, and maybe Justin, you can talk about it further, is the customer today is a lot more informed, right? So before they even come to, if it's suppose your business is digital and then you have website and all of that, I think today every business has a website. The customer acquisition process has become more information driven, more knowledge driven than in what it was in the past, right? So today, when a customer or a prospect comes to your website, they already have the entire information about your company, your products, what people are saying, all of that. I think there was a McKinsey report that I remember reading some time back. Almost 50% or more consumers today already use AI-powered search, and that was slightly different before because the brands could put advertisement, whether it is Google search or display advertisement or any of that, and they can get that immediate attention from the buyers, right? But today, that that immediate, that manufacturing of immediate need doesn't exist like before, because it depends upon if your ChatGPTs, Perplexities, or Clouds of the world, they recommend your brand when people are asking for it, right? The AEO and the GEOs of the world. So then what matters is, over the period of time, what has your brand done to build the trust, and have your customers spoken about it? So from that perspective, yes, the funnel has shifted. I don't think it's broken, but it has shifted to make it more trust driven, value driven than just pay money and put your brand out there and then get it into the funnel. So maybe Justin, what do you think
Yeah,
about?
I completely agree. And it's interesting because, so with Bird Eye, we focus, our customer base is primarily local businesses or multi-location businesses. They're B2C. And this is something that we are talking about a lot with them, is with AI search. If you are, if you're doing a local search for, what traditionally what people would do is like, where's the best pizza place near me? Now you have these AI models that have memory and preference of the user. So that person could say, I'm looking for a great pizza place, but the model, maybe it's Google with personalization or ChatGPT with memory or Claude or whatever you use, it knows that you're a vegan or you have a gluten allergy. And it's going to take those preferences into consideration when it gives you those recommendations. And so this is something that we've talked a lot about with these businesses. And I think it's the same thing, like you were saying here, it's like people will have so much more information now before they even get to your website. If they even go to your website, because they can get all the information elsewhere. With it being so trust driven, this is something that we talk about a lot, is like we talk about reviews, third party websites. It's really, I've always kind of felt like the whole concept of SEO and marketing has been converging. And I think it's really important, whether it's B2B, B2C, however big or large, developing your brand narrative online and putting enough information out there so that you can be picked up by these LLMs. One of the people talk about GEO or AEO, as it relates to AI search. And it's just fascinating to see how this is evolving. Exactly like you said, Savish, I don't think it's necessarily the end of GTM or traditional GTM. I think the funnel is shifting. I think it's a lot harder now to get somebody to fill out a form on a website, because most of the time, if someone wants to download a guide, there's a good chance they don't really need to, because they can go get the same kind of information from an LLM. So it's a lot harder to get people to make those movements. And so I think the way that we track activity and the way that we target people is a little bit different. And kind of going back to what you said earlier about ABM, from what we're experiencing, it's almost becoming CBM of contact-based marketing, because you can get way more personalized with your outreach to the individual person. The biggest difficulty I found with this, though, is really on the data side. If I were to give people advice on, if they're trying to implement AI into their workflows, I would say hire a data person before you hire an AI person, because the data to me is the biggest hurdle. If you have messy data, if you have, outdated contact information or anything like that, it makes things a lot harder to automate. And that's something that, I think every business has, is they probably have a lot of data they don't know, they don't realize that could be used. And they also don't really necessarily have the infrastructure in place to use it well.
Yeah.
And if we go to the basics, because you mentioned earlier, Savish, like today the buyer journey is not broken, but is more information driven. If we think back, like before all the digital revolution, before the existence of websites, if we think like the sales process was a salesperson having meetings, closing meetings, having presentations, and consumers were asking questions face to face, building trust. And then that information journey changed to websites and to digital campaigns where you can show that information. But at the end of the day, what I believe is the information is the same. The thing is, consumers are consuming content in a different way. And I really like
delivery method. Yeah,
exactly. And I really like what you mentioned, Justin, earlier about building your brand narrative online, because all these tools, AI is picking information from different sources. But the basics are, in my opinion, are the same, right? Customer reviews, what people are talking about you. Like if you do kind of good marketing, you should appear in AI in the top result. If you are a company that is totally new, it is way harder, right? And of course, you have all the data layer on top that you mentioned, that you can do contact-based marketing using this tool.
Yeah. The search is still happening, right?
Exactly.
Instead of a person going through and looking through Google's blue links and then they're surfing through different web pages to find this information, the AI is doing it for them. But the same things that the humans would care about is the same thing that the AI cares about when it comes to the public brand, or the information you're putting out there. It just, like, even like Savish is saying, like, the timelines on the marketing operational side is shrinking, but so is the timeline for the information gathering.
Yeah. And I think, just to your point, and you rightly mentioned, right, it's so hard today to get someone to fill the form. But I think the positive side of that is those who fill the form, they have filled after getting all the information, right? So I mean, being an optimist, we would like to see it that way, and we are seeing it, right? So because if McKinsey's stats were to be believed, and if 50% of the folks are really going through all these LLMs before coming to a website, they have access to information that is quite fast to come by. And then when they are visiting these vendor websites, they have gone through the reviews and all of that. So the trust-based buying is all the more important today than what it was in the past.
Yeah. And that 50% to me even feels low. I mean, if you were to use Google, if you use Google, I mean, you're pretty much forced to use AI mode. They're really pushing it. They've made a lot of big changes in the last 6 months.
Yes.
In that regard, and it's going to be the default, I'm sure. I mean, I would say for Google search, they're moving in that direction very quickly.
Yes.
I mean, I had a webinar last month with a few SEO experts and someone that's on the Gemini and search team. And this is what we were talking about, is this movement to, especially on the Google side of AI search. And I mean, I think right now, I don't know if they've pushed this across for everybody, but if I go to my Google search bar right now, it doesn't say search Google or enter a URL. It says ask Google. And it's that people are looking for answers. And so I think that's a subtle change, but to me, it's a signal that they're changing the way that they're approaching search in general.
Yeah. It's all question based.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to talk about competitive advantages, because if every marketing team has access to the similar AI tools for content creation, campaign execution, data analysis, outbound, that contact-based marketing that we discussed earlier, then execution itself may become less differentiated. So if execution becomes commoditized, what becomes the real source of competitive advantage? Is it brand, trust, first-party data, customer experience? I don't know, something else entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I think to simplify this, the tooling is no more the moat, right? Everyone has access to the same tools, $30 subscription, and you have access to best of the tool. And so anyone can tool that up, right? So you have good system thinker, system engineer in your team, connect multiple marketing tools, and then have an MCP connected to it, run it with the right LLM. You have content, you have SDR based research, you have ABM, all that stuff, right? But I think the certain fundamentals, going back to our previous conversation, right? They compound over time, and that I think is non-negotiable. For example, brand equity, right? And this is not something that one asset that is generated using AI, it cannot manufacture brand equity. It is built over the period of time with the trust that the customers have placed on your brand. And I think that's not just a sales activation, right? When you go beyond that, the trust is that consistency that you have built, the customer's touch point, how your customer service is, are you compliant with local laws? It's not just the compliance that is on your paper, but are you really practicing it? And I think there are these fundamentals which is important, and that is sort of part of your narrative, which is non-negotiable. And this will help in differentiating your brand versus the other brand next door, right? So as a marketeer, we need to have this story repeated over the period of time and create that differentiation in the age of AI.
And Savish, I'm really keen to if you could tell us your perspective from Soho, because your company has a very distinctive operating model and long-term approach to market building. I would love to hear a little bit about that story, if possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's been this year, it's our 30th year in the market, and almost everything that we do, we look at a long-term sort of with long-term lens, right? So, for example, GDPR, right? European Data Protection Law. Now that came into existence back in 2018, if I'm not wrong. And this was about protecting the privacy of users within the European region. Right? Now, Zoho has been practicing this since the beginning, 1996. We have got free versions of our product. Almost all our products have free edition, right? Which is basically you can use a Zoho CRM or a Zoho Mail for a certain number of users for free forever. But we never had any ad on any of these free products. And but the industry standard is when something is free, you are the product, right? But in our case, we never had that. Now that has helped us to. It's a very simple business philosophy, but it has helped us to gain that trust with the customer base that we have. So over the period of time, they see that okay, this company is worth partnering. They stay, they expand, and we have then customers who are using probably one product. Today, they may be using 20 of our products. Now, because all of these products are built within, we never acquired the 100 plus products that we have, any of those. So then what matters is each of these products are built by the same team, same company, built on similar technology platform. That's again another long-term approach, right? So long-term approach in go-to-market and long-term approach in product execution as well. CEO, he I think recently said this, and I like that quote because he mentioned in AI when you have a lot of the companies today trying to automate customer support. And I think that's the first thing that the companies are trying to do. For Klarna is a classic example, right? So the payment company. 2 years ago, when AI came in, they announced it big on the public that we are cutting down people, we are automating everything, all of that. And then you find out that it's not easy. Customer support is not a cost center. It is the product. Right. And today, the news is they're all bringing back people because it was not giving the satisfaction. So in all these things, we have to look at, I think Scott Brinker mentioned it in his recent State of Marketing report. There is factory and there is a laboratory, right? So there's factory that is to keep the production line going, which is your campaigns, emails, data, blah, 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 right? And then there is laboratory where you are thinking about future revenue streams, future way of doing marketing, GTM, and all of that. So we have to, I think, toggle between the short term and the long term. Short term to put the food on the plate, long term that will continue to bring food on the plate over the years.
Yeah, that's a great perspective from Soho. And Justin, I'd be interested in your view from a digital marketing and demand generation perspective. What becomes a source of competitive advantage in this context?
Yeah. Real quick to your point, Savish, that it's so interesting that the first thing people thought about automating was customer service. And it's also really interesting because it is one of the first things that people thought about. But 9 times out of 10, if you go to a customer service platform for, a chat bot, it's terrible.
Yes.
To me, it's the most surprising thing is it's like, this feels like something you should be able to automate. But I think people also forget that especially customer service is like, where are humans the most important when it comes to the relationship with the customer? And it's that customer service side is being able to provide that human connection. It's a great opportunity to build that relationship with customers. And if you're automating that interaction, you're losing out on a lot. And like you said, people will end up going back to it. Like, I think there's an area where businesses need to think about, where can I automate in terms of where are we losing effectiveness, but not at the cost of losing that relationship building with your customers. But going back to the question about execution, to me, in something Savish said, and he kind of just like slipped it in, but he was talking about like, well, if you have a good engineer or data systems engineer, and I think that is the key, is it's still a skill thing. Everybody has all these tools, but you have to know how to use them. Like imagine if I was in a race and I was in an F1 car and I was going up against Lando Norris or Max Verstappen in F1. I guarantee you, if I had a much better car than either of them, they would still crush me in a race because they're better at using that tool and they're better at working with that system. And so to me, the competitive edge isn't so much that everybody has a tool, but it's who can use those tools to the best of their ability. I can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me and say, Justin, I can't get ChatGPT to work. Like, I don't understand what all the hype is. Like, I'm like, okay, well, show me what you're doing. And they show me what they're doing. And it's like a terrible prompt, or they're not using the connections. They're not using the tool the way that it could be used. And so they're not getting the output that it could be used. And so to me, it's a skill thing. And then going back to what I said earlier about data, it's an infrastructure thing. Because if you don't have good data, you're not going to get good outputs. And so to me, that's kind of where I see the differentiation is how can you leverage these tools to execute better? Everybody could have an F1 car, but the really skilled drivers are going to be the ones who win the race.
Thank you so much for joining today. This has been a great discussion on how AI is changing B2B go-to-market, not just at the level of tool and tactics, but at level of strategy, differentiation, organizational capability. For everyone listening, the key takeaway, I believe, is that AI may automate more of the work, but it doesn't remove the need for judgment, for trust, for creativity, for understanding your customers and strong GTM strategy at the end of the day. So I think in many ways, those things become even more important today. Well, thank you so much for listening to B2B Marketing Futures. Until next time. Thank you so much.